Thanks again, players, for talking to us. You talk about your trial.
Yes.
As a result of being caught with a weapons cache. What was that all about?
Because I had been in MK when I moved to Johannesburg, I continued with my work. I was new comrades were introduced to me.
Where are we now? 89, 90?
Late 1987. I'm here, I'm in the streets of Johannesburg, and I have contact with comrades who are here. I'm running away from the police. I had been wanted terribly for the whole year, and I just was traumatized at the time. But anyway, in 1988, I started teaching at the Catholic school. And already by then, I have met the guy, like you know, who's an analyst now, Aubrey Majid, who was a member of MK at the time, was also working with me. I had known him in the UDF because we were in a union of teachers called the National Education Union of South Africa. And so we know each other, but we continue to work underground in MK. And of course, we organize in Soweto. We are activists in Soweto of the South African Youth Congress. We are in the teacher union called NUSA. I'm a known activist in the UDF area committee of Soweto, and that's where my political life actually was in Soweto. I was in Rockville, Soweto. Most people think I was born there, but I've just told you I only arrived in 1988 in Soweto. And so we operate as we are teachers at a Catholic school because no other school could take me, but I'm also working as an activist and an underground activist. And so what happened is that when the ANC was unbanned, we were all tasked to organize branches of the South African Communist Party, of the ANC. This is now, we know the country is changing. It's the early 90s, in about 1990. And of course, one of the things that happened during that time is that the ANC suspended the armed struggle. And one of the tragedies of the time is that those of us who had been in different military units of the underground had to collect weapons from different units. And of course, that's the mission we were given was that. And we were collecting weapons in the East Rand, where they were, some of our weapons, and that's where we were caught, and went through that trial, traumatic trial for us, me and Aubrey and Wandile Mazibuko. Very traumatic because it was at a time when we thought change was happening.
What are you charged with? Possession of illegal weapons?
Possession of illegal weapons.
Ammunition? Terrorism?
No, we were not charged with terrorism. We were charged with possession of
illegal weapons
and ammunition. And of course, we ran through the trial, and the nuns who taught with us came to be witnesses. Father Lafont was a Catholic priest in Soweto, was one of our biggest witnesses actually in the trial.
Who's defense counsel?
He's now a magistrate, and he called me sometime last year, so he's still a magistrate. And yeah, I think that was his name. I may be wrong. But he defended us. But largely we had a clash in that defense because he wanted us to plead not guilty. And we insisted on pleading guilty. And I think we saved ourselves from pleading guilty. So that's it. And then at the end of that trial, having been an activist in Soweto...
Sorry, then you get sentenced.
Yes, we got 5 years, but because time was changing, it was suspended. And at the time, our leaders are back here. Some of them are back here, and I got tired, and I've always wanted to go study, and I never had the inclination to be in politics. You know, and Chris once said to me at the day when we were having those meetings, you guys must just go back to school and not trust that politics would be your bread and butter. And actually, I think from that meeting, a few months later, I resigned as a teacher. Not knowing where I was going, I actually applied thereafter to VETS. And that's many people know me as a student leader, as SRC president at VETS, but I was from working life, from MK, from the UDF, and then I went back to school. And when I became SRC president at VETS, It looked like I was just a student, but I had gone there just to study law and politics and prepare my life after liberation as an independent person.
Was that before Mpofu's time? I understand
It
he
was.
also
I
went.
know Mpofu because we were all in Azaso together, but I used to know them because most of them were at Campus Lodge at Wales when I was in the underground. And so I used to go to campuses, actually, organizing. Some people thought I was a student when I was there, but actually I wasn't. So I know them, but I had known them and the generation of the 1980s, early 80s of Azaso, because I was part of that leadership. And then became part of the new leadership in the 90s when I'm back at Wits. It was really by accident. I didn't want to be involved in politics when I went to campus, but it just became difficult. A couple of comrades who knew who I was just thought I couldn't just sit and not be active.
Yeah. Just to be clear on this suspended sentence, because I don't want it to leave anything hanging.
No, sure.
This is not suspended indefinitely.
No,
on condition that you're not caught
yes,
with
of course,
illegal
that I'm
weapons.
Not, yeah, absolutely. And
it wasn't indefinite.
no,
it was for a period.
It was for a period of 5 years.
5 years, and then you were never caught with weapons.
Not during the time. And
or since.
I've never been caught committing any other crime except that crime. If it was a crime.
Yes.
And I mean, it did arise when not arise, but I had to sort of, as I must, when I applied to be admitted as an advocate. It sits there, and the Judge Malan, who admitted me, knew I put it there because I was prepared to say, well, if I'm not allowed to be an advocate because of that, so be it. So it's there, but fortunately, it was not a crime of fraud or anything like that. Yeah.
So then you started pursuing law studies at Wits.
I studied at Wits. I had already been studying through UNISA, and that's why I think I did my English 1 and and History 1. And that's why when I went to Wits, it was to do my second year, because I was credited for what I had already done. And so I did my BAs, and I did political science, I did English up to 3, which was my major as well. I did history as my major, and then law. Law as a BA subject. And then at the end of that, I also worked towards the end of that period when I was SRC president. Between my BA and my LLB, I also worked with Mary Metcalf for a period in Tokyo. I was their speech writer and all of this. And then I finished my LLB, right?
Where are we now? 92?
Yeah. No. We're now in 96.
96. Okay.
I was SRC president at a very difficult time at Wits when it's elections, it's 94. It's a very, very difficult time. I mean, it's one of the toughest moments of my life as a leader because it was a changing time. We were not expected to do radical things, yet universities were the same, just the country outside was changing. And so it was a tough time, but when I finished, and then my BA, I did my LLB, right? I went to law school, I did my LLB. And by that time, I worked as at the Premier's office in Gauteng.
We 96, 97, 98.
Yeah.
You at Wits.
No, I did my master's in the University of Port Elizabeth.
Masters
it was called University of Port Elizabeth then. It's called Nelson Mandela Metro University now.
The old UPE.
And what we were doing, it's a program, you go there and come back, and you go there and come back. Yeah.
So you did your master's in politics and...
it's called Politics and Political Economy.
Yes.
Studies in Political Economy, yeah.
Tell us about that.
You know, it was... I've always been interested in political theory. Law was not something that I studied. I think it was by accident because I couldn't be the priest I wanted to be, and law was something else I wanted to do. But when I studied politics in my BA and philosophy and English, I got to study something that is close to my heart, just society and how it organizes itself. And for me, that also, although as an activist I had read a lot of political literature, but that organized academic approach to reading was interesting to me. And so I learned in my BA a lot of theorists. We all do Stuart Mills, Karl Marx, and in philosophy I did Kierkegaard, Nietzsche, and I got interested in those philosophies. But when I did my master's, it was much more focused because it was dealing with just politics, political studies in general, right? And of course my focus at the time, because you do different segments, was regional integration, which is the southern part of Africa that I did, the political economy of Africa and South Africa. And we did all the theories that I had learned in my BA. And of course my focus was largely the political economy of South Africa during the years of '96, from the dawn of democracy to that time, just looking at how we've developed politically. And that is why I was saying to you, I'm still interested in what I call the political economy of race. And that was my focus about political economy, as to whether the macroeconomic policies we had were compatible with the historic mission South Africa had to take people who had been oppressed out of misery. And that's what I focused on. And I finished that. And I think worked slightly as a consultant. I had left government. I was slightly disillusioned. And then ended up, because now I had an LLB and I didn't know what to do with myself. And I didn't want to go into politics. I had seen it. I was young. I was 30 or in my late 20s when I got to know what happens in politics, formal politics, and it didn't suit my personality. And I took a chance with the bar.
Yeah, so didn't you think at the time, we're talking 97, 98 now,
98, 99 now. I also taught slightly for a year, just before I came to the bar at the University of Port Elizabeth.
In politics?
Politics,
yes. Aren't you thinking at this time, because there was a time when I was doing politics at university, I mean, I didn't quite agree with his way of, I'm talking about John Stuart Mill and Jeremy Bentham, the way they viewed things, the greatest happiness of the greatest number and so on. Because I kept asking myself the question, if you have to put the interest of the greatest happiness of the greatest number first, that means every individual will put the greatest happiness of the greatest number bar him or herself. If every person adopted that policy, then the greatest happiness is not of the greatest number. It's actually the greatest happiness of the greatest number if everyone puts him or herself first than everyone else.
Well, basically, yeah, that's what it was. I was quite critical of those philosophies that place the individual, because it doesn't matter how sophisticated the theory is by Stuart Mills and them. The fact of the matter is that the individual and the interest of the individual become a philosophy by which society is run. And of course, there's a big role for the individual in society. But you know, I was never attracted to those theories, and that's why, without being uncritical of Karl Marx, I was much more attracted to those sort of leftist theorists that looked at society in a much more collective way than the liberals did.
Yeah, and of course there will be philosophers like Thomas Hobbes who used to puzzle me, because I never believed that, you know, this thing, and I know now this is going to get controversial, I never believed in a super being to whom we must all bow. So this Leviathan thing, that the God,
the big God, the God complex,
that if we don't bow down to one superpower, then life would be short and brutish and people will be killing each other, there'll be lawlessness. I never bought into that, because I always believed in the inherent goodness in humans. like this concept of Ubuntu. I had never even heard of Ubuntu at the time. I mean,
but it was just our life.
Yes, we're talking mid-90s now for me as I'm doing politics. So, and I'm thinking, why must you have a person to whom you are, one person to whom you are all, or one being to whom you are all answerable? That person makes all the laws for you to obey. And if you don't obey those laws, then you are lost. I just never...
Well, I've lived in that contradiction, Klaus, because I'm a Christian. Right?
Okay.
I live with that contradiction. And I don't think it's an unhealthy contradiction. A contradiction between my own leftist views and the fact that I believe I've been a Christian since I was young, up to today. And so in a way, in me, as critical as I am of those notions, but I remain a Christian. Which is
That's an interesting, it's an interesting contradiction coming from a lawyer, though.
Absolutely.
Because Christianity is about faith.
Yes.
It's not about believing something because you've seen evidence of it. Faith, by its very nature, is, you know about this, what is this person, Doubting Thomas,
yes.
Who wanted to poke his fingers in the holes of the nails to make sure that this is indeed Jesus who come back from the dead because they had nailed him. And now he has this bad thing. Everyone who is skeptical is known as the Doubting Thomas. Now, for a lawyer,
to be a Christian is a bit...
to be a Christian at the same time, which means you follow faith, not evidence. Isn't that an interesting contradiction?
It's not an either or, you see. You know, all of us are a lump of contradiction as human beings. Even you grant lawyers too much faith. This whole thing that lawyers are so married to evidence and facts is a myth. They follow things they believe, their political preferences, and they will abandon their philosophies and their beliefs and all sorts of things they tell you if they want a particular economic outcome or political outcome. That's why our courts, our lawyers, as we speak now and in many societies, have confusing jurisprudential positions. It's because these lawyers, these judges who boast about being fact-based actually are not. We are all people of faith. We are all people of our own preferences. It doesn't matter how much we hide it. And we get caught in terms of controversies in society because then we try and do the studies we do about which we call ourselves intellectuals to achieve preferences that have nothing to do with facts.
Isn't that a brutal truth? You know, I'm watching the confirmation hearing of Judge Barrett in the United States for the U.S. Supreme Court. She is asked a question. Firstly, she's a Catholic, a stout Catholic. She's a federalist, whatever that means. And she calls herself an originalist when it comes to interpretation of statutes and the Constitution. So in other words, she interprets the Constitution from the prism of the people who wrote it in 1770, Futek, in 1776 or sometime. Now, I ask myself the question, what kind of lawyer interprets a statute in 2020 from the prism of people who wrote it more than 230 years ago? And that's where this contradiction, this healthy contradiction that you're talking about hits me. It's like this person is purely in denial that she actually does tap into her own personal experiences in interpreting the Constitution, but she will not say so because why? She has painted herself into a particular corner that she is an originalist. And therefore she wouldn't be caught dead saying something that is contrary to that dynamic.
It's because human beings, we are physical beings, we are intellectual beings, but we're spiritual beings. Whether we believe it or we don't, it's up to you. But all of those components of life, we can spend a lot of time about this philosophy, is that it doesn't matter which one we deny. those components that make up a human being, when they are fully developed, you get a better human being. Right? The reason most of us as intellectuals are shy about being Christians or all of this, it's because there's a belief that for you to be an intellectual, you must not be spiritual. Right? And it's a myth. It doesn't understand the totality of a human being and the history and origins of human beings. And so I don't think there are contradictions. And then you say there is no evidence. You know, the absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. And so the reason we all absolute in our beliefs and things we say, it's because we are not modest enough to say we don't know. We know very little about life, about the universe. And if we were humble and modest and did not want to be known as super intellectuals, even about religion, we would say, I don't believe A, B, C, D, but I don't know enough. And that's my view, is that, yes, I'm an intellectual, I've studied certain things that I know, but there is so much I don't know. And therefore, I'm unable to make firm views that if you are religious, you are not an intellectual. Or if you are religious, you don't believe in facts, you just follow faith. I think there's so much we don't know about the spiritual aspect of a human being.
Or so much that we don't remember.
I just think we know very little. And maybe we will never know. But a human being and society, the universe is much more complex than we quickly conclude it to be, because we are people of answers. We want certainty, and we want to tell the world that everything we do has been thought through. There are just things about life that overwhelm us, that are big, that we can't solve no matter how intellectual we are, and that's the aspect of being a human being that we don't understand. You and me feel a particular pain when someone dies, right? And we do certain things, whether we like it or not. It's because there is a part of our life that requires much, much more than just being an intellectual who deals with facts and books.
The absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence, you say. I can't see how that works in the legal environment, though. Maybe it may work in the spiritual environment. Can you, or do you disagree with that?
No,
Can you give an example? Okay.
No, oh, you mean it can't work in
the legal
Let me tell you
field?
how it works. It
Okay.
can't work. I mean, you're right, but that you've not caught Ngalwana does not mean there is no evidence that Ngalwana should have been caught.
Quite.
That's what I'm saying.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
The fact that a lot of people are in jail and they did very little, and a lot of people are outside jail and they should be inside, right? And the absence of evidence that could take them to jail, the fact that the evidence is not sin,
doesn't mean they didn't do it.
It's not there, and maybe that evidence will hide forever, but it doesn't mean it's not there.
Yes.
And
Okay.
so the fact that you don't agree that there is a God, you don't agree that there's spiritual life, does not mean you are right. It just means you've settled for that approach in life.
Well, it means I can't get my head around it. I've taken my heart and put it aside.
Yes.
Now I'm trying to work it in my own, using my own cerebral tools to understand. I mean, there is this evolutionalist, what's his name? The guy who was thrown in jail for that. What's his name? Darwin.
Yeah, Darwin, yeah.
So my cerebral tool tells me that we've evolved from apes, all of us, white, black, whatever.
All of us, yeah.
And then there's religion, which seems to suggest otherwise, that we didn't evolve. We were actually created by this super being to be humans. And we're given a greater brain capacity than all other mammals or animals.
Yeah.
Now, it makes better sense to me as a thinking being
Yeah.
when I think about evolution. It makes better sense than a super being sitting there combining water, dust, and air to make a human.
Well, because I'm obsessed with knowledge. So I don't conclude. If you told me about Darwin and I read them, I don't read and say they are talking rubbish. I read because I've accepted that is for any intellectual worth the title. Must not conclude too quickly about things in life that are complex, whether they are science, philosophy, or religion. And I tell you now that I have not made conclusions about any aspect of life that I know and I'm disputing the other. I read Darwin and I get him. I read the Bible and I get them.
You get them both.
I get them both.
I don't get the Bible.
Yeah, I'm sure it's because you also don't understand that your existence is a tiny little bit in the history of existence, of the universe. Because we are arrogant human beings, we are arrogant animals, we believe that the answers to complex things about the universe must be made known and discovered during our period of existence. We live during a very tiny little piece in the history of the universe. And just leave room, Shegas, just that there is 90% you do not know about the things you've concluded don't make sense.
Okay, on that note, let's leave that, and then we'll take up in the next segment on life at the bar.